How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brown Logan, and today I bring you a great video from senior political advisor in the White House, Stephen Miller, wrecking Jim Acosta of CNN. This was excellent. You know, I'm pretty sure most of you have seen it by now or you've heard about it. I just want to bring it to you in full because you may have seen the clip, you may have seen the piece here and there, but you may have not seen the full exchange between the two of them. This was excellent. It's about the RAISE Act. If you don't know what that is, that's basically a way to reform legal immigration to get it down to a more reasonable level. Right now, we're about 1 million per year or more. We want to get it down to about 500,000, which is a little bit better for us. And we also want to have more standards, you know, speaking English, which is a current standard, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Speaking English, you got to have some kind of skill. You got to be able to provide for yourself. Basically, let's get the best of the best from the world rather than just any old Tom, Dick, and Harry to come across our shores. Now, what I want to do right now is go ahead and roll the clip and you'll see the exchange between the two of them. And after we get done with that, I'll come back and I'll address points that Stephen Miller made. And I'll also address points that Jim Acosta made. And I'll tell you how racist it was or it wasn't. So without further ado, go ahead and roll it.
I will give, yes.
What you're proposing here, what the president's proposing here, does not sound like it's in keeping with American tradition when it comes to immigration. The Statue of Liberty says, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. It doesn't say anything about speaking English or being able to be a computer programmer. Aren't you trying to change what it means to be an immigrant coming into this country? If you're telling them you have to speak English, can't people learn how to speak English when they get here?
Well, first of all, right now it's a requirement that to be naturalized you have to speak English. So the notion that speaking English wouldn't be a part of our immigration systems would be actually very ahistorical. Secondly, I don't want to get off into a whole thing about history here, but the Statue of Liberty is a symbol of liberty enlightening the world. It's a symbol of American liberty lighting the world. The poem that you're referring to that was added later is not actually part of the original Statue of Liberty, but more fundamentally, the history, but more fundamentally,
you're saying
the
that
history
does not represent.
I'm saying that the notion. I'm saying the notion that I'm saying the notion.
Stephen, I'm sorry.
No,
that sounds
Jim,
like,
let me ask you a question.
That sounds like some national park revisionism.
No, what I'm asking you
the
is,
Statue of Liberty
Jim,
has always been
let me ask you a question.
of hope to the world.
Jim,
for people to send
Jim, do you believe
people to this country?
Jim,
and they're not always going to speak English, Stephen.
Jim,
they're not
do you
always
believe
going to be highly skilled. They're not always going to be.
Jim, I appreciate your speech. Jim, I appreciate your speech. So let's talk about this.
It was a modest.
Jim, let's talk about this. In 1970, when we let in 300,000 people a year, was that violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land? In the 1990s, when it was 500,000 a year, was it violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land?
Was it violating?
When it was 700,000 a year. No, tell me what years. Tell me what years. Tell me what years meet. Tell me what years meet Jim Acosta's definition of the Statue of Liberty poem law of the land. So you're saying 1 million a year is the Statue of Liberty number. 900,000 violates it. 800,000 violates it.
You're sort of bringing a press one for English philosophy here to immigration, and that's never been what the United States has been about, Steve.
But you're also your statement's also shockingly ahistorical in another respect too, which is if you look at the history of immigration, it's actually ebbed and flowed. We've had periods of very large waves, followed by periods of less immigration and more immigration, and during we've had
a period of immigration right now. The president wants to build a wall. You want to bring about a sweeping change to
surely, Jim, you don't actually think that a wall affects green card policy. You couldn't possibly believe that, do you? Actually, the notion that you actually think immigration is at a historic law, the foreign-born population in the United States today, Jim,
staff on Monday talking about how border crossings.
Do you really? I want to be serious, Jim. Do you really at CNN not know the difference between green card policy and illegal immigration?
No.
I mean, you really don't know that?
Cuban immigrant. He came to this country in 1962, right before the Cuban Missile Crisis, and obtained a green card. Yes, people who immigrate to this country can eventually. People who immigrate to this country not through Ellis Island,
Jim, as a factual question,
ways do obtain a green card at some point. They do it through a lot of hard work, and yes, they may learn English as a second language later on in life.
So, but
this whole notion of they could learn, they have to learn English before they get to the United States. Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?
Jim, actually, I have to honestly say, I am shocked at your statement that you think that only people from Great Britain and Australia would know English. It reveals your cosmopolitan bias to a shocking degree that in your mind, no, this is an amazing moment. This is an amazing moment. That you think only people from Great Britain or Australia would speak English is so insulting to millions of hardworking immigrants who do speak English from all over the world. Jim, have you honestly never met an immigrant from another country who speaks English outside of Great Britain and Australia?
Nope.
Is that your personal experience?
Of course, there are people who come.
But that's not what you said, and it shows your cosmopolitan bias. And I just want to say,
it sounds like to you you're trying to engineer the racial and ethnic flow of people into this country.
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant, and foolish things you've ever said. And for you, that's still a really the notion that you think that this is a racist bill is so wrong and so insulting. Jim, the reality is that the foreign-born population into our country has quadrupled since 1970. That's a fact. It's been mostly driven by green card policy. Now, this bill allows for immediate nuclear family members to come into the country, much as they would today, and then it adds an additional points-based system. The people who've been hurt the most, the people who've been hurt the most by the policy you're advocating are
What policy am I advocating?
apparently just unfettered, uncontrolled migration. The people who've been hurt the most by the policy.
What you're doing is for
The people who've been hurt the most by the policy that you're. The people who've been hurt the most by the policy you're advocating are immigrant workers and minority workers and African American workers and Hispanic workers.
Yeah.
And it has
African
no.
American community. Now you brought it up again. You said you wanted to have a conversation and not target. Is it going to be a target?
This is
now?
what we want to do.
Using the African American community, are you going to target? I'm not trying to be funny.
Right, and I know what you're saying. What you're saying is 100% correct.
Thank you.
We want to help unemployed African Americans in this country and unemployed workers of all backgrounds get jobs. And insinuations like Jim made, trying to ascribe nefarious motives to a compassion immigration measure designed to help newcomers and current arrivals alike, is wrong. And this is a positive, optimistic proposal that says 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, we want to have an immigration system that takes care of the people who are coming here and the people who are already living here by having standards, by having a real clear requirement that you be able to support yourself financially, by making sure that employers can pay a living wage. That's the right policy for our country, and it's the president's commitment to taking care of American workers. I apologize, Jim, if things got heated, but you did make some pretty rough insinuations. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll hand it over to Sarah. I think that went exactly as planned. I think that was what Sarah was hoping would happen. I think that was exactly what we were hoping to have happen. Thank you.
That's the question.
Thanks.
Okay, so you saw what's going on there. You saw that. Now, that was a priceless takedown. You know, shout out to Stephen Miller. Hats off. Salute to him. That was excellent. Jim Acosta was just not really ready. You know, he came across like a guy that's in the ivory tower and never leaves. He doesn't really understand what's going on in the world. I want to address the whole English speaking thing. That currently is a requirement to become naturalized as a United States citizen. There are exceptions, like if you're over 55 or something like that. There's, you know, small exceptions. But for the most part, if you want to come over here, you got to know how to speak English. So that's already a requirement. So for Jim Acosta to say that somehow that's racist, to say that you got to speak English, I mean, come on. And then he says that, oh, you can learn how to speak English later. Really? You can learn how to speak English later? Well, why is it a requirement right now? And then he said, oh, you only want people to come from UK and Australia. It's like, really? See, now you're trying to assign some racial stuff to it. Now you're trying to make it be like an ethnic thing. You're trying to say that he's like a white nationalist that wants an ethno state. That's not what he said. There's a lot of places that speak English that are not white. You know, Liberia, for example, which is an African country with a flag that looks a lot like ours that was created for the express purpose of having free slaves be over there that came from America, right? They speak English right there. They speak English in other West African countries, Nigeria, Ghana, etc., all over the place. In Africa, about half of the countries in Africa have English as one of their languages, if not the language, one of the languages that they speak. So to say that, oh, UK and Australia are going to be the only ones that speak English, I mean, come on. On my live show I do on my channel, I get calls from all across the world Sweden, Serbia, people, Uganda, Nigeria, everywhere. Everybody speaks English. I never had anybody call my show that did not speak English. So to say that, oh, well, you don't know. Matter of fact, I had a call from Venezuela yesterday and the guy was speaking fluent English. So to say that, oh, well, UK and Australia, that's the only place you're going to be able to speak English. I mean, come on. It doesn't make any sense. The reason why you got to speak English is because that is our language. It's unfair to live in America and be denied a job because you cannot speak Spanish. Spanish is not our language. We speak English. So that is important to have as a part of immigration policy. Also, about this whole poem on the Statue of Liberty, that Statue of Liberty poem has nothing to do with us. That's not in the Constitution. The founding fathers didn't come up with that. That did not come about until the late 1800s by a woman by the name of Emma Lazarus. And the poem is called A New Colossus. The poem was put there to raise money for the pedestal that the Statue of Liberty is on. It was a fundraising tool and it was an art project. That is it. And that is all. So don't try to assign some art project and some fundraising thing to all of us as Americans. The Statue of Liberty has nothing to do with nothing. You know, it ain't about sympathy. It ain't about none of that. Talking about giving your huddled masses and you're weak and you're tired. Look, this is not a charity case over here in the United States. This is serious business. When you're talking about immigration, we got real problems. We got people on the streets that are dying. You're talking about veterans dying in the street. They're dying in the VA because what they need, the resources are being drained by other people who are here illegally or who are coming into the country and not contributing. When you're talking about welfare, they're not able to come over here and fend for themselves. We have too many that are on welfare right now in the USA. So why bring in more welfare dependence? This does not make any sense. Let's have the best of the best. Be able to contribute to our economy, be able to contribute to our society. Do not be a deterrent from others being able to do what they got to do in their everyday lives. Do not be a criminal. I don't understand how hard that is. It's really simple. This guy, Jim Acosta, was giving the speech, just like Stephen Miller said. He was giving the speech about some compassion and some heartfelt stuff. I don't know if the guys at CNN really believe that, or if it's just a lot of hot air, or if it's like what Van Jones said, it's nothing burger when it comes to Russia and they're just talking.
Well, Wolf, I think at times this White House has an unhealthy fixation on what I call the 3 M's, the Mexicans, the Muslims, and the media.
I think these guys are like actors. They pay actors to come on and put on a big show. But if that was the case from Jim Acosta, this time it backfired big time because Stephen Miller, you know, really just served them up real nice. And it was beautiful to see. And the Raise Act is going to be great because of what it does for the country. We need to have stronger immigration policy. We cannot allow the door to be open to everybody in the whole world. And let's bring in the best of the best. Let's focus on fixing our people in the United States. It doesn't matter what color you are. If you're an American, you're an American. If you're an American, you're my people, period. I don't care what it is. You know, I love other countries and that's fine, but let's focus on America. And shout out to all the English speaking countries that are not white, like Jim Acosta thinks. You know, I was saying that he's racist, but maybe he's not so much racist as he is just dumb. Maybe it's a combination of both. You racist and dumb. You know, you racist to think that only white people can speak English. I mean, come on. English is the number 3 language in the whole world, aside from Mandarin, which is obviously very big because you got 1.3 billion Chinese people in China alone. That's not even talking about the satellite countries like Southeast Asia, Philippines, etc., where they may speak Chinese as a second language. Just in China alone, you got 1.3 billion people. But you got Chinese, Mandarin, of course, then you got Spanish, then you got English. English is spoken by at least 500 million people all over the world. So it is not an uncommon language. Okay. So at the end of the day, what the Raise Act has in it is not racist. It's not xenophobic. It's not trying to have a white ethno state. Say nothing about that. It's about having the best of the best into the country. So what do you think? Do you think this was a great takedown by Stephen Miller? Did he pretty much put him in his place? It was funny how he talked about the poem, The New Colossus, and then he asked him Acosta, well, what about back in the day when we only allowed 200,000 in or 300,000 in? What's the actual number that's going to be appropriate for that poem to represent as far as representing the whole country? He was pretty much silent. He had no recourse. I think he was pretty much trained to say just a few lines and pretty much just focus on that. Maybe he had it written down. He did not have any responses written down for what Stephen Miller was saying. So shout out to Stephen Miller, shout out to Trump's administration. I think there's going to be a good administration. I look forward to the next 4 to 8 years. But what do you think? Do you think that we need to have stricter immigration policies, especially the whole thing about English? I mean, that's pretty important. But what else about the policy do you think is appropriate? You know, the merit-based system. If you got family over here, you're pretty much good to go. Being able to take care of yourself, not being on welfare, food stamps, etc. Whatever your comments are, let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.
This whole notion of, well, they could learn, you know, they have to learn English before they get to the United States. Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?